Y'all, it's not still airing, right? You gotta find it on streaming or something. You know, Barney's Friends. Can anyone sing the song? I think that is a no.
I'm trying to remember.
I love you, you love me, we're a happy family with the great. No kissing. We talk about no kissing.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I actually said the word kissing. But listen, I loved Barney whenever I was a kid, okay? Now, I understand for some of you that might make you lose your respect for me, but listen, he's a big purple dinosaur, and BJ was like my favorite. I thought I was going to be him. Man, I loved me some Barney. And when I was in kindergarten, I went to a very small private Christian school, like really small, like 30 kids. Around 30 students there from kindergarten through junior high. It's this tiny school out in the country. This wonderful lady, Miss Sandy, was my teacher. I was the only kindergartner in the whole school. I was a class of 1. So I could sit down with Miss Sandy every day, and she showed me kind of like, okay, let's walk through the date. Okay, let's look at the time on the clock. All that kind of stuff you get to do in kindergarten. Okay, so that was pretty cool. Now the school was on the church campus out there in the country. Okay, and on that same campus was a wonderful older couple named Joe and Dean. Okay, Joe was this wonderful white-haired older lady who just loved me and my family like crazy for I don't know why, no reason at all. Other than that I know that time. I know Jesus, right? Back then I'm like, why do you like us so much? But she did. She loved us so much, and her husband Dean as well. And for my, had to be my 5th birthday, she got me this really cool present that I was stoked about. Okay, she got me a purple plastic Barney lunchbox. Okay, it was fantastic. I was so stoked about my purple Barney lunchbox. I ran to tell Mom, and I was just so excited. You know what I was excited to do, right? I was excited that first time I got to pack the lunchbox with whatever was in the kitchen at home. I don't remember what I put in it, probably crackers or something. And pack it up, lock it up, bring it to school, put it in my spot, and wait for lunchtime. Okay, because when lunchtime comes, I'm going to crack that puppy open and be so proud like I own the place. Like, I got this Barney lunchbox, I'm ready. I remember these feelings, like not like perfectly because I was 5, right? But I remember this feeling of being like, man, yes, this is so great. I'm going to be at lunch at the table. I'm going to get this lunchbox. I'm going to open it up. It's going to be amazing. Here's what I actually remember happening once I got sat down at the table. I was the only kindergartner. So once I sat down, everyone else, I realized everyone else is older than me. But the problem was everyone else realized that too, and they made sure that I knew that like I was the baby there. And like you didn't quite belong. Like maybe you should go sit with Miss Sandy. Because like we're trying to hang out, right? And then to put an icing on that cake, what I remember is that they took the thing that I was so proud of, the thing I loved the most, the thing that was like, this is me. This is what I bring to the table. They said, that's actually proof that you're a baby and you don't belong here. Like you have a Barney lunchbox. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, that hurt. That hurt a little bit. You know, I think that the table is a powerful place for human beings. I think the table is just an incredibly life-changing, life-wrecking, whatever it might be. It's just a powerful, potent place for human beings. It's where a lot of life happens. The table, I really believe, I think the table can be our place, the place of our acceptance, our sustenance, our significance in the stable place from where we can live a life that matters, a meaningful life, or it can be the place of our alienation, our starvation, our insignificance, and the unstable place from where we are constantly reminded that our life won't ever amount to anything. Because it's such a powerful place, those messages come through in a different way across the table. Whether there's food there or not, something happens potently in relationships and to us and the way we're shaped and formed and molded over the course of our life across a table and at a table. Think about it, y'all. Some of the most meaningful memories, if you took a second, you just tried to remember, some of the most meaningful memories of your life, holidays, celebration events, likely involve a table in some way. And, you know, I think Jesus actually paints a picture for us. Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the one we follow, the one we love, who gave us life, he paints a picture for us of what life in the house of God is like, and do you know what he uses to describe that life? Well, here's what he says in Luke chapter 12. In verse 37, he's talking to his friends about religious hypocrisy and a few different lessons. And he teaches this parable of a rich fool, and then he talks about the things that make us anxious. He talks about a different kind of life, a different way of life. And here's what he says in verse 37. In verse 37, he says, "Blessed will be those servants." I mean, this means those children of God. Those that are trying to live a life with God. Blessed will be those servants. The master finds alert when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will get ready, have them recline at the table, and then he'll come and serve them. He says, listen, life with God is lived in a house, and he's actually inviting you to a table, not just any table, a table with your seat. With your seat, and here's the kind of life he's planning, a life where he's going to actually serve you at that table. Make sure your plate is full. Make sure you're taken care of. Make sure you know that's where you belong every day of your life. That's the blessed, the happy, the fulfilling, the meaningful life. He said, blessed are those who are found that way. Here Jesus, he's actually foreshadowing the moment, right? Because we know in the last week of his life, he'll sit at the table and he'll invite his friends to recline, just like he says the master will do. And he'll actually serve his friends, just like he says the master will do. And he washes their feet. And so he teaches this beautiful moment, and then he actually shares this physical moment with his friends later. He makes clear that our place in God's house and God's kingdom with God is found at the table. The most meaningful, intimate, and final things Jesus would ever say to his friends on earth before he died, guess where he said them? He said them at the table. John, the beloved apostle, he has a vision he's given on the island of Patmos, a vision of what's to come, of some of the realities that currently exist. Some of it probably is things that have already happened and occurred. But he gets a vision of it all. And ultimately he gets a vision of the kingdom of heaven. And it's really amazing what it says in Revelation 19:9 is a part of this vision of what it'll be like. There's this angel, as he's having this vision of the kingdom of heaven, of this worship happening around the throne. This angel bends over to him and he says to John, he says, write this down, John. And verse 9 of chapter 19 of Revelation says, blessed are those invited to the marriage feast of the Lamb. He said to me, these words of God are true. These words of God are true. John's vision of the arrival of God's kingdom on earth features a supper where those who are invited will have a seat made for them, a place, a home with God. This is the picture Jesus paints of life in the house of God. It's around the table. Here's what I think Jesus taught us. I'm jumping ahead here, but show me that slide that says Jesus taught us that life begins at the table. I know it's at the end. This is what I think Jesus teaches us. If you read his teachings, if you're faithful to what he's written and what he's wanting us to hear, I think he teaches us that Jesus taught us that life begins at the table. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about life at the table, because a life of significance begins with a deep sense of what? A deep sense of who we are, belonging, which comes from a deep sense of identity. And both of those things become clear to us from our place at God's table. That's what Jesus teaches. He says, if you don't understand that there's a place I've gone to prepare for you, and I want you to recline there every day of your life in God's kingdom, and hear from my Father and dine on his words every day of your life, then there's going to be days and moments, and maybe every day, where you doubt who you are, where you doubt whether your life matters, where you doubt whether you belong or not, where you doubt whether you can bring a Barney lunchbox to a table and actually be received and accepted and loved, because that's what you had to bring to the table that day. Let me list a few things here, okay? Let me list a few things, and what I want you to pay attention to is what of these things on this list kind of gives you anxiety, kind of makes you restless, kind of gets your whatever it is that makes you kind of stressed out, gets that meter going, okay? Tests, like final exams, driver's tests, whatever kind of tests. Some of you that's going to hit, some of you others it's not. Things going on in politics. Things going on in politics, red, blue, wars, not wars, all that kind of stuff. Things going on in politics. So some of you that's going to hit what college you're going to go to, or what job you're going to have when you grow up. What about what to wear or how to look on a daily basis? Yeah, you can raise your hand if you want, okay? No shame, full participation, okay? How about dating? Okay, boys, girls, all that kind of stuff, right? How about friends? Friends, I know friends are supposed to be like a place of peace, but sometimes it's like, not so much. How about performances, like sports, music, theater, all that stuff? Yeah, yeah. Social media. All right? Family. Yeah. Listen. What I want you to do is just take a moment here, right in the middle of our talk or our time, and talk to someone around you about whatever on that list that I just listed out kind of stresses you out, and why does it? What about it kind of gets your stress meter ticking, okay? Take a second, let's say 60 seconds to talk about that with Ace.
I know I'm just like every person I think I hate college culture. It's like if you don't know what you're gonna do by like time of 8, you have no future in your life. If you don't have like 5.8 GPA, you're screwed. You know like I know exactly what I'm gonna do, but I don't know how to get there, and I don't know how to like the college and credits is something that works, and so I like people explain it, but I just like fall asleep. I like lose sleep overnight. The way the thing is for me is I hate. It's like our English class usually the counselors come in, and then like if you don't know what you're gonna do, it's okay. It's not okay. I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. It's not okay.
Okay. Let's bring it back. So, listen, life is crazy and life is hard. Life is difficult, and all those things, it's actually impossible to turn those activities, to turn those things that are going on in the world off. Right? Tests are going to come. That's where we live. That's what we live in. Those are the systems we exist in. Right? Whether they're physical tests or some other kind of tests that's happening, like a relationship test. Who knows, right? Okay? All those things that stress us out, it's like, how do I push the stop button on those? It's like, I can't do that. So I guess I'm doomed. I'm destined or doomed, whichever word you want to use, okay, to a life of stress and anxiety. Because how in the world do I turn those things off? Is there really any other way? Did you know that according to the Nationwide Children's Hospital website, 80% of teenagers in America today are living with sleep deprivation? Some of you hear that, you're like, yes, that makes sense. That makes sense, right? Others of you figure out a way. You get your little sleeps in whenever you need to. Maybe during the sermon right now, who knows, okay? Preferably not. But you know what sleep deprivation results in? It results in drowsiness in class, lower grades, increased risk of accidents, anxiety, depression, and poor athletic performance. All those things just result in what? More stress. So you're sleep deprived, which results in you behaving in a way that creates more stress in your life because you're not performing well, or you're not keeping up your grades, or whatever it might be. And so it's just this terrible cycle where it's like, I'm trying to figure this life out, but it's just kicking me in the butt. Like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to get ahead in life? How am I supposed to live this life? And listen, that's 80%. That's most of y'all sitting in this room living with sleep deprivation. Here's what the Apostle Peter wrote in 1 Peter 5:8. Here's what he says about this reality that exists in the world, at the world's table, that there's something going on, that it's not just you against the world, but there's actually an enemy. Here's what he says in 1 Peter 5:8. So you know this verse, it says, be sober-minded. That means be alert, be ready, be someone who's not fooled so easily, because there's a reality to the world that there really is an enemy. There's an enemy. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion looking for anyone he can devour. That's what he says in 1 Peter 5:8. That's the reality that we swim in, that we live in. And so if that's true, here's what we try to understand. That life was a gift from God, meant to be lived at a table where our place is never in question and our plate is always full. Like, that's the ideal, right? That I get to live a life where I understand who I am, why I'm here, what I'm living for, and my heart and my stomach, and I'm just full all the time. I get it, like I've got life. I'm sucking the marrow out of it or whatever. But Peter says there's an enemy that needs to displace us from our place at the table by distracting us so that he can devour us. So we're supposed to be eating and dining on the words of God, but Satan's actually attempting to destroy us, to put us on the plate. And how does he do that? He does it through all those things that create stress and unrest and anxiety in our life. And it distracts us from what? It distracts us from the reality that there's a better way. What's that look like? A life where we're being devoured. A life where we're what's on the plate instead of a life where we're being served by being invited to recline at a table in the Father's house. It looks like a life where you wake up in the morning dreading the start of another day. You ever had that? You're like, I really wish this day wouldn't start. It's here though. Where you feel alone. Where you feel like you don't belong anymore. Where you feel like no one understands you. Where you feel like less like life is a gift and more like life is a burden. And I know that life because I've lived that life. It sucks. So listen, Pastor Josh, our senior pastor, he taught us about this idea last year. And he said, all right, that's crazy. Last year, he taught us really well. And I'm going to try to teach you some of this stuff in these next few moments. But if you want to learn more in depth about what I'm going to be talking about here, this way of life with God in His house and His table, you can do two things. One, you can read a book. It's called Cycle of Grace by Trevor Hudson and Jerry Haas. Okay, Cycle of Grace. You type that in Google, Amazon, whatever. You're going to find the book, Trevor Hudson, Jerry Haas. Okay, or you can go and watch the Pathway sermon series on Gateway's YouTube channel instead of doing whatever else you do on YouTube or TikTok. I don't know. Okay, whatever you do. Instead, replace that time with go watch the sermon series. You're going to get in a lot more depth than I have time for here tonight. Okay, but here's the different way of life that Jesus is teaching us. He's taught us. He lived. That Pastor Josh laid out for us so well for us to follow him and live a life like Jesus. Last year, okay? In the early 1900s, there was a psychologist named Frank Lake and a Swiss theologian named Emil Brunner, okay? Here they are, Frank, Emil. Okay? They noticed that there were some British missionaries that were sent to India. And what they noticed in particular, they didn't just notice that they were going. What they noticed is as 1, 2, 3 months into their missionary trips, so many of them were falling out of ministry. They were burning out. They were getting weary. They were making decisions like it's just not worth it anymore. 1, 2, 3 months, just so quickly. And what they noticed is when they were going, they were excited. They were on fire. They were energized. They were catalyzed. They were ready to go. But within 3 months, so many of them were just falling out and saying it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Like I'm done. And so they said, why? Why? So they began to ponder and reflect. Like, why is that happening? That's crazy, right? Why are these followers of Jesus who are excited to be missionaries have the greatest reason for joy in the world, Jesus? Why are they ending up feeling like it's just not worth it anymore? Right? And the truth is, like, the world can say that about us sometimes. Like Jesus says, listen, they'll know you're Christians, they'll know you're my children, my followers by your love, the love you have for one another. But sometimes when the world looks at us, they see very, very weary people, very burdened people. And maybe that thought crosses the mind, and maybe it's not such a bad thing to ponder. That we believe in a Jesus that promises, what's he promise? He promises a light and easy burden. But then you look at the fruit of our life, and you look at the fruit of my life, and we're going to say, it's not light and easy. So like, do you actually believe that? You know, I think the word that would come to mind is like junk, because it's not the life I see you living. And so Emil and Frank, they looked at the missionaries like, what? This doesn't make any sense. Long story short, Emil and Frank, they were driven to reflect on the life of Jesus in the Gospels. So what they did is they read the Gospels like 1 billion times, searching for the answer. It's a hyperbole. I don't know. I don't think they read it 1 billion times. They read it over and over and over and over again, looking for the answer. So many of us go other places looking for the answer. Emil and Frank said, well, let's just go read the Gospel of the life of Jesus. I think there might be something there where it's the answer for why this is happening. And so they did that. What came out of their reflections on Jesus' life was that he lived differently than most of us do. It's really, really simple is what they found out. His life is different. And so what they found out was these ideas. They said, you see, most of us live our life like this. That we live our life like this. If I do something great, produce something great in my life, say something great, then I'll matter. And if I matter, then they'll treat me like I matter. And if they treat me like I matter, then I'll be happy because I must belong. My life is acceptable. I'm acceptable. Do you see? That the progression of the way most of us live, and the way those missionaries were living that were falling away, and the way that a lot of us, even followers of Jesus, live right now, is if I do something great, I'll matter. And if I matter, then they'll treat me like I matter. And if they treat me like I matter, then I'll be happy because I must belong. My life is acceptable and I'm acceptable. In other words, if we think that's the way human relationships work, then we fool ourselves. We fool ourselves if we don't think we transpose that onto our relationship with God. And we think that someday we're going to die face to face with God. We're going to have to present Him with something to get into heaven. Because that's how it works with humans. It must be how it works with God. And when we trick ourselves to think, no, I think differently, but that's not true. That's not how we actually live and how we behave and how we live with God. So Lake and Bruner, they noticed something different about Jesus' life that appears to be lived in reverse order of that. And this is incredible. Some of you guys have heard Pastor Josh teach about this, or you're one of his kids, so you probably, I don't know, have read the book. Who knows? Okay, but here's what they notice in Jesus' life. They notice if you read the Gospels, before any ministry happened, before one single day of ministry, before one miracle happened, before the wedding at Cana, before any work of Jesus' that's recorded in the Gospels is done, he heard this from his Father: "You are my Son, and I'm pleased with you." Translation: "You're accepted. I accept you." In Matthew 4, you see Jesus being baptized in the Jordan by John the Baptist, and the heavens open up, and a dove descends on Jesus, and you hear the Father's voice, and he says, "This is my Son, in whom I'm well pleased." Before a single day of ministry, before he could do anything that would say, "I matter," before he could do anything that would say, "I matter," God said, "You matter." They noticed that. They said, that doesn't make sense. Not with the way the world has set the table. The way the world has set the table is do something that matters, then we'll say you matter. And God said, Jesus, you haven't done anything. I love you so much. And from that place of acceptance, what they noticed was Jesus carried with him a deep sense of who he was wherever he was. They also found that Jesus went back to this table often to be filled or sustained by what his Father says to him. They see throughout the Gospels times whenever he's done a lot of ministry work. He's preached to thousands, or he's fed thousands, or he's healed people or brought people back to life, and then he'll go away, to the point that sometimes his disciples are like, where did Jesus go? But he's like up on a mountain, sitting at the table, hearing from his Father, I love you, I'm pleased with you, recline here, let me serve you. Again and again and again, Jesus goes. You read the Gospels, you're going to see what Frank and Emil saw. A Jesus that kept going back to the table again and again and again to hear from his Father. You're accepted, I love you, you're my Son, I'm pleased with you. Because Jesus had a deep sense of who he was by reclining at the Father's table, y'all. And that's called prayer. He knew that everything he did mattered. He knew that he mattered. That's why he said it, and was able to say in John 14:9, listen, the one who's seen me has seen the Father. He said, listen, me and the Father, we're in league. We're synced up. Like what he commands, I do. Who he is, I'm moving towards. So if you've seen me, you've seen him. And he knew that he mattered. And he never questioned it. Because he sat at the table. And so here's something that isn't difficult to see. Because of those realities. Because he heard from the Father, because he went back to the table again and again and again, and he dined on the Father's words. Everywhere Jesus went, incredible good things happened. Like what? He turned water into wine. Right? He asked a friend to step out of a boat and walk on water, and he actually did it. He told the storm to stop raging, and the storm stopped. He told his friend to walk out of the grave, and he walked out of the grave. He looked at a woman who'd been caught in adultery and said, you're forgiven. He looked at a man who the whole world had said, you're a paraplegic because of all your sin. He said, you're forgiven. And he went away praising the Lord and walking on his own 2 feet. Jesus lived the most fruitful life of any human that's ever walked the face of the earth. And Frank and Emil, what they noticed was that none of that was stopped for what made him matter. You know, we think it does. It's like, you don't think Jesus matters? Let me tell you about what he did. And God's like, I just want to tell you who you are. I just want to tell you who you are. So Frank and Emil, they ended up coining an idea based on what they observed from the life of Jesus called the cycle of grace. Okay, Reese got that one, bub? Yeah, there it is. Thanks, buddy. Okay, the cycle of grace is a cool little graphic, okay, but it's just a way of living that balances input, and that's grace. Input means grace. Grace is something that we can't get on our own. Grace is translated as like a gift. It has to be given. It has to be given. So the input side of it, what's here, this is all grace. This has to be given from outside of us. Given from somewhere else to us. In this case, from God to us. It has to come in. Okay? The cycle of grace is a way of life that balances that grace, that input, with output. And that's fruitfulness. But puts them in the right order. Fruitfulness is what we do. Okay? A lot of times we think, let me do a bunch of stuff, and then I'll show up at the table with look at how much I matter. And God's like, I loved you before you did anything. Why do you think you need that? Like, why? Do you even know who I am? Do you know my son? Why are you bringing that? Why are you bringing that to my table? Cycle of grace is a life that feels like a gift. It's a life that flows like Jesus's. But most of us live a much different life in something called the cycle of works. And the cycle of works reverses it. It says, if I achieve, then I'll matter. Then I get to reap rewards of this life, whatever that is. I get to eat, okay? And then I know I'm accepted. Then I'm for sure accepted. But the problem is, we're never for sure about this. Why? Because we've never received enough here. Because we don't allow ourselves to receive enough. Because if we allow ourselves to receive as much as we need, then we're saying, "Oh, I've done enough significant things." But we never think we've done enough significant things. So then we say, let's just do more. And then my life will matter. And Jesus says, this sucks. This is the weary and heavy laden life. And he looks at us as his children. In 2025, he says, so many of y'all are still living that way. The cycle of works is a way of living that says you have to earn every bit of input you'll ever receive. All the graces, they're earned. Don't we know that doesn't make sense? When you look at the word grace, it has to be unearned. It's a gift, but we don't live that way. We live like we got to earn it. If you want respect, you've got to earn it. If you want to matter, do something that matters. That's how we live. So for these next 4 weeks, I want us to focus on the input side of the cycle of grace. Go back to that cycle of grace one, Reese. I want to focus on the input side of the cycle of grace for the next 4 weeks and talk about these graces of acceptance and sustenance and what they mean. In order to do that, I'd like to start right where Jesus' life and work began, by hearing his Father say, "You're my son, I'm well pleased with you." All right, so this is John 15. Okay, verses 1 through 8. All right? Here's what I think is important about John 15, 1 through 8. When we put a microscope over a small piece of Jesus' final words for his friends at the table before he would go die on the cross, in these 8 verses, I believe Jesus outlines really well for us the way of life with God in his house, at his table. Okay, because no less than 7 times I think he tells us what it takes to begin. What it takes to begin. Where life begins. Okay, here's what he says. He says, I'm the true vine and my Father is the gardener. We're going to read this verse next several weeks. These verses. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit he removes, and he prunes every branch that produces fruit so that it will produce more fruit. You're already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, and I in you, just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself unless it remains on the vine. Neither can you unless you remain in me. I'm the vine, you're the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit because you can do nothing without me. If anyone doesn't remain in me, he's thrown aside like a branch and withers. So they gather them, they throw them into the fire and they're burned. But if you remain in me, my words remain in you, ask whatever you want and it will be done for you. So my Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit. You prove to be my disciples. The key to the way of life and where it begins at the table is said by Jesus no less than 7 times in these verses. Verse 2, 3 times in verse 4, verse 5, and verse 6, and verse 7. It's found in this word remain. The original Greek word is meno, and why we say that is because it's richer. It's richer than the English word remain. It means to stay, remain, wait, continue, endure. But in the sense of a relationship, it means to exist permanently in, united in an inseparable way. It means constantly in relationship with. He's saying life begins by being in constant relationship with me, never letting a moment slip by in your day where you're not aware of my presence in, around, above, below, behind, before, and after you. You're like, that sounds impossible. Jesus says, actually, there's a way. There's a way. And not a way of condemnation, but a way that turns your life, your perception of your life into what God intended it to be, which is a gift. Jesus tells his friends to remain. And listen, y'all, we know it. Difficulty in life is everywhere. And of course, life will feel like a burden some days, but there's a way that is light and easy. He promises it to. Do we believe in that promise? God doesn't give us life because we do something for him. He gives us life because he loves us. And he wants to tell us that every day of our life, that's where every day of our life needs to begin. Okay, I'm not trying to sound like that Tangled girl. Okay? Okay, that's not what I'm doing. Okay? But Jesus is saying that's where your life has to begin every day. If you don't want to live a life where you're not sure that what you do matters, where you're not sure that you matter, where you're not sure you're accepted, where you're not sure you belong anywhere, where you're not sure anyone cares about you. He says you need to start at the table, reclined at the table, hearing from my Father you're loved. So where exactly is that? Jesus calls it the vine. What does that mean? If a branch from the vine tries to live without being attached to the vine, what happens to that branch? That's right, Galita, it dies. Jesus is saying that being inseparably united to the vine constantly is the only way to actually live. Any other life is by counting down the days till we die. And some of you, if you're like me, a human, there are days where it felt like, this day's not going great. Jesus goes a step further and actually calls himself the vine. And it's what he says. He says he is actually the place, the source of our life with God, that he's where we need to start every day. That he's our seat at the table. And why does he say that? He says because of sin, we can't get there on our own. Sin, the bad stuff we do, has disconnected us from God, displaced us from the table, cut us from the vine, and the only way back is to be grafted in. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 11:17. You garden, you take a branch that wasn't there, or maybe even wasn't supposed to, or maybe even from another kind of tree, and you graft it in carefully and lovingly, and you take care of it, and you make sure that it knows that you belong here now. And Paul's saying, Jesus and God is saying, that's what my son did for you. Here's what Jesus says earlier in his conversation with his disciples at the table. He says, I'm the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. That's John 14:6. In that same chapter, he says, if you believe in me, then I'm the only way. If you believe in me, then I prepare a place for you. So how do you do it? He did something that couldn't be done because of my sin. Here's what he did. In order to pull my seed out from me at God's table, to graft me into the vine, he showed up on this earth and experienced the greatest life of rejection and shame anyone would ever know. More than a 5-year-old boy getting rejected because of his Barney lunchbox at the school table. And also, but he died for that boy too. Didn't he? And he experienced more than anyone would ever know and ultimately died so that my death clock could be destroyed. Now he says, if I choose to believe that he is who he says he is, God, and that he died to prepare a place for me with God at the table, then he'll pick my life up out of the muck and seat me with God. Listen, y'all, this is where we'll end. There's an implicit message we hear at the world's table, and it's this. Your life only matters as far as it adds value to me. If you don't measure up, you don't belong. What you love is embarrassing. And that message infiltrates our flesh in everything we do if we don't pay attention. And Jesus says there's a better way. By remaining inseparably connected to him. How do we do that? This is where it meets the road. One way we do that is relationships with other believers. Small groups is one of the ways we do that in the youth ministry. Small groups gives you a chance to hear from another child of God that you are accepted, that you matter. Relationships with one another were designed by God because he exists in eternal relationship with himself to be the place from which we experience the greatest gifts he has to give us. Love. You realize you don't get to experience love alone or outside of a relationship. Love comes in relationship. It's the greatest gift he has to give us. And that's why Jesus teaches us that life begins at a table, because there's nothing like a table to put you face to face with another human in a relationship. You know, the most significant moments of my life happened in homes where I sat around a table with other human beings. I've been a Christian since I was 12 years old. But the first time I felt what it feels like to carry the identity of a child of a father happened when I was 17. And it sounded like this for me. You'll never not have a home here, and you'll never be anything less than my son. That's what it sounded like for me. I heard that over and over again. It felt that every time I sat at the dinner table at that house, that there was a chair for me at that house. And I got to hear over and over again, you'll never not have a home here. You'll never be anything less than my son. When you think about the tables of your life, students, what are the messages that you hear? And how do the messages you hear at those tables help or hurt you as you face the tests and the friends and the family and the performances and all the things that create anxieties and stresses? How do those messages you hear at those tables help or hurt you as you face them? All the anxieties of life. Do they make them lighter and easier, or do they make them more burdensome? Because if they make them more burdensome, then Jesus says you're at the wrong table. You're being invited to a different table. Jesus had a table where we get to come with nothing to offer but ourselves. With nothing to offer but ourselves. Why? Because everything acceptable to offer, Jesus already gave with his own life. There's nothing left to offer to put on the table to curry favor with God. Jesus done it all. Now all God wants is me, just me, nothing else. In fact, if you show up with something to offer to curry his favor besides you, he says it's as if you don't even know him. Read Matthew 7. And Jesus invites us to that table to hear over and over again how much we are loved and accepted by God, that we are his son and daughter. He invites us to that table every day, and in particular when we gather together. He says that in 1 Corinthians 11:25, as often as you gather, do this in remembrance of me. Come to my table. Remember my broken body. Remember my spilled blood. He says when you're together at the table, you have the greatest power. Come on, you have the greatest power to wash one another with my love and my words when you're together at the table. So small groups tonight, your leaders will have communion. Leaders, if you haven't grabbed this stuff yet, grab it out of the 214. It's all there for you. There's a little message. I want you to say it for your students as well as you serve communion. They're going to serve it. Your leaders are going to serve it to you, to any of you that would like to have it. And as they do, they're going to remind you of who you are by saying, you are God's child. You are loved. You are delighted in. Behold the God that loves you. That's the message Pastor Josh gave us last year. We're just going to speak that over you. And if you're not God's child yet, you haven't accepted Jesus and been baptized, then you're going to be invited to receive that gift, to take your seat at the table for the very first time. Because life is a burden until someone invites us to the table Jesus set for us and tells us who we are. And his is the table where life becomes a gift. Okay, so leaders, if you need that supplies, make sure you grab it. Students, don't forget to turn in your note cards. Have a great small group.